No. Anyway, it's a wonderful pleasure to introduce my friend for many years, Eduardo Arathoon, who's going to come speak to us about FungiRED and his Guatemala clinic and experience.
Juan Luis.
This is for you. Okay, gracias. How does it work? This is
green one goes for it.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity talking to you, and thank you to the committee that invited me for this talk. I'm going to talk to you about FungiRED, which is a program that we started in Guatemala. And these are my conflicts of interest, and we know you already know this, so I'm going to skip it. This is what we did the study in the whole country in Guatemala. And in the context in Guatemala before the integration of the program was that every HIV clinic was affiliated to a hospital. And in the hospital, they only gave antiretrovirals. When somebody got opportunistic infections or came with opportunistic infections, there weren't enough tests or any treatments for them. So for that reason, we decided to start this program with a diagnostic package of opportunistic infections. Will include the Cryptococcus, Histoplasma, tuberculosis, PJP, depending on the symptoms of the patients, non-tuberculous mycobacteria. And what we did is that we sent the results to the doctors from the samples that would send. So the components of the program for the diagnosis of opportunistic infections were four. First, training. We decided to train the doctors on how to diagnose and treat the infections, which was when they didn't know how to do it. And there was establishment of a network, and also we had a database. Every time they sent a specimen, they couldn't send it if they didn't fill all the data in the database. And via courier, it was sent to the central lab, and in the lab, the results were returned by mail. Also, there was an integrated, at the end, we integrated the cryptococcal antigen test for all the units. The patients, the population that we saw was new HIV diagnosis, return to care, patients with antiretrovirals already. And these were the tests and the three main sections of the mycobacteria and two fungi. And this was a 2-year project, 2017, 2018. This is the start of the project. And there were 2,127 patients. And this sample was about 60% of what the National Program on HIV saw as candidates for this type of intervention. The burden of HIV disease was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this. Also, we wanted to measure the incidence of opportunistic infections and the mortality related to the opportunistic infections. What we found was that we found 140 cases of histoplasmosis, which was the highest of all of them, 78 cryptococcosis, and tuberculosis 121. So fungi was more than half of the sample. And here in this slide, what you see is the incidence of the patient in the whole population. 30% of opportunistic infections with advanced HIV disease had an opportunistic infections. So they're coming very late for the program. And these are the two fungi. And what we see here is that the overall incidence of histoplasmosis was higher than tuberculosis, which was unexpected at the time we did this. And also with lower CD4 counts, there were more fungi. Something else is that we went, if we took only the advanced HIV diseases below 200 CD4 counts, 30% had opportunistic infections, as I said. how many patients 200, and so if we went to 350, we would add an additional 9% of patients. So the cutoff of 200 CD4 counts for the diagnosis was questionable here, and this were each test cost, and half of the patients that died of other causes, and there was 115 patients died in the first month of follow-up, and 12% tuberculosis and 11% critical. These are the mortality at 30 and 180 days. On the left, what you see on the red curve is patients that had opportunistic infections, and 2% at the bottom, the ones that didn't have opportunistic infections, and 180 days.
ago, 1974, with the in-house immunization and complement fixation that many countries still continue to use. Then we start, as we didn't have the possibility to have antigen tests from the United States, we start developing our own ELISA and develop a set of monoclonals that we never commercial, but we used for a while. Then in 2007, we started and had the fortune together with CDC, with Dr. Arathoon, developing the in-house ELISA, CDC ELISA. 2010, we started validating molecular tests. 2015, we have a small consensus group that we hope is growing and joining the European consensus group. Then we try to get better the molecular tests, and we move to a real-time and another approaches. And a big thing happened between 2014 and 2022. We validated the first commercial ELISA that we all know, and validated also the developments of the lateral flow. So at the moment we have Histoplasma, ELISA, and lateral flow, sometimes available, sometimes not. Molecular just if it is required. So this story you all know, Dr. Arathoon was just here a minute ago, and from Chile, this is the first results when everything, all this story began, when we developed together with the CDC, the first ELISA in-house, we validated in Guatemala, in Colombia, and then in many countries. But this was not possible to keep as an in-house. CDC was not meant to be distributing tests. So the first commercial kit came, and we actually worked very closely with the company and helped to develop this ELISA that is the one that we are all using now. Also, with the same cohorts, the Guatemala, the Colombia, many other countries now, we have contributed to validating the lateral flow, other commercial ELISAs. I don't want to talk about anything in particular, but that the red show that not all tests available in the market are so good results, so we have to be careful, and we advise people sometimes because they say, oh, I got this ELISA, I got this lateral flow, but you have to be careful when you choose that. In the molecular diagnosis, we started in 2010. We validated an ST-PCR targeting the gene that includes the 100 kilodalton protein. For us, that works very well. For many other countries, we jumped and transform was not so easy to real-time PCR with an animal model. We also tried other targets. And also, some other researchers in our group are collaborating in bioinformatic approaches. The idea is that the targets cover all clades of Histoplasma capsulae. This has been shown many times, but I wanted to show it again to remind you that everything started 2005. We said that the first meeting was in Suriname, was actually in Paramaribo, training with the in-house ELISA of CDC. There was quite some traveling and carrying all these reagents and sending samples. So different now that we have the commercial assets. Thanks to that, and many countries here, this is not just Colombia, we have the good fortune to be part of this group and help with many publications together with Juan, with all our friends, to make that Histoplasma came into notice to the governments, and that's why we are here today. Recent activities that improved, because remember, reference lab have all the capacity, but we cannot forget that don't have this capacity. And that's this project that started in 2021, that academia, together with the National Health Institute and private universities, we are training all around the country. Whoops. So we created the National Health Institute, supported by CDC and the academia, a microsis website, virtual trainings, which have been very successful. And the good news is we are going to go back and to have a national survey that we have get better, and we hope that many other states in our country can develop. So this is the National Health Service. As you can see, 491 laboratories. So far, we were able to retrain and bring all the technology to 33. So it's a big project still. And this is very important, and Dr. Jorge Cortez, who is here with us, presented beautifully this morning how important it is to adapt the global guidelines to the proper needs and the capacities of the country. So we published this guideline for Colombia. Take-home message: education, education, education. Research, no matter where it comes from, we know is heavily dependent of the academia. Diagnostic networking inside the countries, especially countries that are so big, encouraging inside the country to work as a team. The National Health Service, whoever is there, sometimes we have support, ups and downs, with the clinicians, microbiologists, and authorities. And this is my big thank you to all the people in Colombia, past team, new team, and all the wonderful collaboration that is just in Latin America, or worldwide. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna have a slight change in order, and we're gonna, because Juan Luis has to leave earlier, he's gonna go ahead and get his talk now on screening strategies.
The future of the antigen, which is all the futures are important. Well, this, I think I am an independent guy, and I received the invitation from Alexandra. I was very happy. And what I'm going to share with you is, I'm going to share with you my question. I ask question myself because I don't understand very well. I'm going to start with histoplasmosis screening. My question: what tests should we use? Because you can see there that they are not 100% correlation. So and I think it's not going to be 100% correlation. The second one is who should be screened. You look at this, it's very easy to know. Minus 50, you need to screen, minus 100. But it's advanced HIV, the right population, because you have incidents between 200 and 350, and even with plus than 350. If we compare with tuberculosis, the numbers are pretty the same, and both of them are primary Africa. So, what do you think? I don't know, but I have an idea. When you compare with crypto, when you go plus 350, the incidence is very, very low. But that's not happening with histoplasmosis. And then there is one: how can we achieve better risk success? How we get the exposition, the cost factor, and the pathogenicity of the histoplasmosis. The next one, we are going to antigen detection for histoplasmosis and diagnosis follow-up. My opinion, a life-threatening disease is a false positive can be managed by the medical team, but the false negative can be found. So we need to play with that. And the false positive delay, we have fungi that cross-react with the ones, we have antibiotics, plasma, and how many proven cases we need to get to understand what is happening here. And then we move to the food. Who, when, how is eating galactomannan food? Who of them do translocation, and who of them are false positive? It's really, really difficult. In my opinion, it will take years to accomplish this comparative studies. So we need to think in a different way. And that's something that Guillermo and I have discussed many times. What is the definition of a symptomatic patient? It's very difficult to define an asymptomatic patient in people with less than 200 or people with advanced HIV disease. So we need to get an agreement to understand everybody what is the meaning of that. And well, I think we need LFAs, but only with LFAs we are doing silent populism. We need to have strong laboratories, really, really strong laboratories, and conversation with infectious disease practitioners and with radiologists and with everyone. We need a team. It is not a simplistic issue. And then the follow-up. Well, for me, the first thing that we need to do is to convert the tolerant number into a band into a number if we want to do follow-up with the left. We have done it with the cryptoantigens from the theoretical point of view, with Anna and Imi, with a company in Spain, so we can change, we can take a picture and with the intensity, there is correlation with the intensity of the band and the concentration, but we need to prove in the real world. So this is a laboratory approach. If we can do it, well, we can use the LFA everywhere. In the hospital, we can do it, and we can see if there is correlation between the concentration and the outcome of the patient. Thank you.
One minute. Oh, sorry. And you were so fast. Thank you, Juan Luis. Appreciate you jumping in. And we will continue now back to the regular program. I believe next on the list was Rita from Nigeria. Thank you, Rita. Did you get a little mic?
On her.
Oh, he has that. Two mics. One for the bridge.
Okay, so I've been asked to, so maybe I should thank the organizers, right? But I think they've been trying to overlook again. So I've been asked to speak about capacity building in fighting histoplasmosis. After what we've done in Nigeria and some scale up to other African countries. So this is nothing new, this is what we know. But we also know that we could have co-infections of histoplasmosis and TB. And we know that there's really no data on the African continent, and it's easy for people to misdiagnose histoplasmosis as TB. So I came up with a theory, looking at my country, taking my country. I decided that my country was one of the high-volume HIV countries, and enough, there was no data on HIV and histoplasmosis, despite histoplasmosis being an AIDS-defining disease. But when we look in the past, we saw that there have been cases of histoplasmosis in the healthy population before HIV came. So my question was, did HIV and histoplasmosis have a meeting in Nigeria and say the people are very miserable, they have bad government. If both of us stay here, they will die. So histoplasmosis being the guy that's there before said, okay, I will do the honorable thing, I will step aside and HIV will take over. Because in the HIV population, there was no diagnosis of histoplasmosis, but there were lots of patients that had smear-negative TB, treatment failure TB, multi-drug resistant TB, and died from TB, even in cases where they had no microbiological confirmation of TB. So we then did that skin sensitivity testing to see the histoplasmosis, sorry, how do I go back? I can go back. I think I can. All right. So the red one. Okay. So the histoplasmosis really do the honorable thing and step aside. So we did a skin sensitivity testing. The last one that was done before we did this was over 13 years before this. And we did it and we found that histoplasmosis was still very much around. So why was it not being diagnosed? We then looked at this low-hanging fruit, the population with advanced HIV disease, and we came up with, we did 2 tests, 1 week apart, the IMI test, and we came up with 7.7% prevalence. And interestingly, we had some co-infections of both TB and histoplasmosis in this group of patients that we have never had reports in the country of histoplasmosis. So what is the challenge? Why is the diagnosis not being made? We had earlier done a survey among doctors in Nigeria to see what their knowledge was about invasive fungal infection, and only 2% had a fair knowledge of invasive fungal infection. So it was clear that outside of superficial infections, the doctors didn't know much about fungal infections, so there was poor clinical evidence or suspicion on the part of healthcare workers. So if the doctors are needed to request the test and the doctors do not know that the problem exists, no one is going to request the test. and the test is not requested, the labs will not procure it. And if the labs do not procure it, they do not have the skills to do the test. So it's a vicious cycle that we needed to break. And capacity building was a catalyst that we needed for that change. So after that study, we went ahead and built capacity, and then we did screening in 10 high-burden HIV sites in the country. I think for us, some of the critical things was the feedback from the training. Is there a pointer? No pointer. Okay.
Yeah, that's one.
So these are doctors that we trained. Plenty of feedback, but the most critical thing, for what was most profitable, was the fact that this doctor could confidently say at the end of the training that if it is not TB, it is not TB. Because for a long time in the country, if the patient walks like TB, smiles like TB, behaves like TB, must be TB, even when the expert is negative. So we could say that we were successful. Then we also did an assessment. We did a pre and post test to see, was this training impactful? And if you can see, we asked about 20 questions. One of these questions here, you could see that there's some confusion, right? Question like 3. They knew more before the training than after. It also showed us that diagnostics was a challenge, and we also needed to modify our training model. So the outcome of the trainings was that all of a sudden people started publishing cases of histoplasmosis. These are 2 different cases. One was lovely outcome. Patient was treated with amphotericin B, did well, is alive in care. The other one, the diagnosis was made 2 weeks after the patient died. And the patient has been managed for TB for 2 years without any gene expert being positive. But the patient was completely died before the results came out. And on the basis of that, the Clinton Health Access Initiative was doing an advanced HIV disease package of care in the country, and they automatically adopted the screening for histoplasmosis. We did it in 10 high-burden sites, and we did get some cases. And they received medication, and they are alive, and they are in care. I'm happy to say today in my country, it's part of the advanced HIV disease package of care. Histoplasmosis has been included in the policy document. So how to achieve that success, we thought, could we go into Africa and do the same thing? So we have this training for 8 African countries. I'm sure you can see some familiar faces there. And then the training was both for the labs and for clinicians. And if you look at the evaluation there, you can see the results for histoplasmosis. 1 minute.
1 minute.
Yeah, it was pretty successful, and we do hope the current advanced HIV disease we have more reports coming out of Africa now, both cases and studies, and we do believe in the next 3 years this map will have changed further. Because one of the things we discovered that if you look for histoplasmosis, you will find it. And so in conclusion, emerging data is suggesting that histoplasmosis is common in aged population in Africa. Capacity building is critical for early diagnosis and management, and there's need to include histoplasmosis screening in the advanced HIV disease package of care. There's a critical place for histoplasmosis package of point of care test, because it's a continent that has challenges with electricity, skilled manpower, and also point of care test is critical. And sustained availability and accessibility to antifungals is needed. Thank you.
Final speakers, Aude, I don't know if I can pronounce it. Aude, Sturny, Leclere. Who's going to show us the FungiCAM project in Cambodia. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to Alessandro and to Antoine for giving me the chance to present this project today with this very nice community. So I'm going to present you the objective and the project of FungiCAM, who has been studied since 2024 in Cambodia. So let's start with the right beginning. So I won't give you too many details because we talked about it yesterday and also today with Sturny, but I have to give you the context. So we have been conducting a study in sub-Saharan Africa, a histo study, to study the prevalence of histoplasmosis and to study the performances of new rapid diagnostic tests for histoplasma with a biobank of samples, with the statistical trial. So I won't go back into details regarding stats because you got it. We found very interesting results with positive histoplasma antigenemia with or without TB proven. We got positive antigen associated with mortality, but we also found 20% of the patients who survived during statistical trial at the end of the trial with no diagnostic and specific diagnostic or treatment for histo, but who've got RB treatment. The next step of this project is to keep on going because it's not finished in Uganda. And also we have been starting the ACE project to observe the antigen screening and see if we have to treat or not in different kind of patients in Cameroon, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. We have exactly the same issue in sub-Saharan Africa than in Southeast Asia regarding fungal infection. It's high mortality, high morbidity. It's described in quite a few papers. I put some data in this slide. And in these countries, we have quite a high burden for HIV patients and also a lot of prevalence of TB. And we know that if we look in the TB population, we are going to find a fungal infection. And as the clinical presentation, it's very similar for TB and histoplasmosis, as well as thalomycosis. There is, for sure, we found it. And so there is ongoing study, especially the study is done with Dr. Lee, that will describe that if you look for this dimorphic fungi, you find it in the HIV population in Vietnam. There is some study conducted in Thailand, in Vietnam, but none in other countries. There is countries we have no data. So statistical trial was conducted in Africa, in 2 countries, but also in Asia. It was conducted in Cambodia and in Vietnam. So we decided to keep on going with the prevalence study, and this is how we designed the FungiCAM project. So, FungiCAM project. So the idea is to do an evaluation of the prevalence of pneumococcosis, histoplasmosis, and thalomycosis due to Thalomyces malafii in this population, HIV population in Cambodia. But first of all, this project is a capacity building project. So it will be in collaboration with the Institut Pasteur du Cambodge. So we have quite the same objective than what we've done in Histo. So we're going to look for the antigenemia of these 3 fungal infections. We are going to see if and if we can find antigenemia positive with the mortality of the patient. So this is the criteria of statistical trial, the same that we show in the site of Ivory Coast. The idea is to improve the perspective of a better package of care for adult HIV patients in Cambodia, but in general in Southeast Asia. So, FungiCAM study, first step. The idea is to train the lab. So, we train the people from the lab at the Institut Pasteur because the samples are stored at the Institut Pasteur du Cambodge. But also we had some people from 2 hospitals in Phnom Penh. So we start with clinical patient on cryptococcosis, histoplasmosis, and tyromycosis. It was done by Hugo François. The idea is also to show the lab how it's challenging to try to get a diagnostic on patient. Then we train them on the antigen testing, LFA, ELISA. Then we train them also in molecular biology qPCR. But this is not enough. So we take advantage of this training also to do a direct examination and fungal culture, because we have to keep on going to train people in general in medical microbiology. So this training was done last October. So the second step is the experiment. So this experiment of FungiCAM is done at Institut Pasteur du Cambodge. So the idea is to do the LFA and the ELISA for Histoplasma. Then we do the CRAG for crypto. We won't perform the ELISA as the CRAG is the reference. For tyromycosis, this will be the LFA, the prototype from IMI, and the ELISA conducting Duke with Dr. Lila. If we have positive results with the antigen, we will perform the qPCR in plasma. Second step is the clinical training. So with the preliminary data that we've got in the project, the clinicians were trained from 4 hospitals in Belgium with the colleagues from Institut Pasteur Paris and from French Guiana. So they've been trained with the clinical presentation of the patient with the 3 fungal infections, with clinical cases, and we also got some video and the participation with Dr. Lee. So we've got the ethical approval. We've done the lab training in Institut Pasteur in last October. We also trained the people for the data analysis management, and as I say, the clinical training was done in April, and we've got some preliminary data. So it's really preliminary data, but we have some positive antigen for CRAG for 11% in this population, and we've got 5% of antigenemia for Histoplasma. We have to do, next step is to do the tyromycosis experiment because we don't have yet the test. We will do it quite soon. And we will also do the whole analysis with the test that is patient data. I'd like to thank everyone in this lab, in particular the team from Institut Pasteur of Cambodia. And I give you a rendezvous maybe for next team, from next team or for next ISHAM to give you the result of FungiCAM.
Okay, fantastic. You guys did great. I really like this. I think I'm going to bring it with me to my next meeting. Anyway, we have some time for questions. I know there was a lot of good discussion the last round, so let's open it up to the microphones. Hopefully you guys stand up and ask any questions you might have. We can't see out here because it's so bright, so if there's someone at a microphone, please ask the question. David.
So I would like to ask Beatriz what she thinks the role of PCR is. So we know from the FungiRED program that the histoantigen was about 70% sensitive. Diego's meta-analysis suggested more like 95%, but I think that was possibly confounded because that was how the diagnosis was made. I may be wrong. And other people have done PCR, and so we, in the last analysis declaration, we included PCR in that as well as antigen. So what is the place of PCR, and why have we not got commercial PCR anywhere?
Thank you, David. So that's, in my opinion, PCR is going to be for reference laboratories. It's not going to be for
You can say, I'm hearing.
Okay. Again, that for, in my opinion, after training for antigen detection, remember it's an ELISA that even between small. So it's the antigen test, even that seems so simple, needs equipment in the lab and trained people and the cost. However, we are able to overcome that, and the lateral flow is going to help us with that. But really molecular tests are going to be, in my opinion, for the Latin American countries, maybe no first world, in reference laboratories where we receive the samples and we do a confirmation, because you need a specialized lab. We're going to hear later from Alexandra Lanio how sophisticated the molecular can be, and it's not going to be for routine. We are happy. For us, it's 100% sensitivity. Cross-reaction is not a problem, and not even with tuberculosis. Don't forget that we have tuberculosis as a concomitant disease. There is no cross-reaction. So the idea is that in each country, depending on how big, there are good reference labs that are able to run, but there's going to be a routine no, unless we develop a small device that is being used for another microbiology pathogens that is molecular. But while we don't have that, it's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah, just to comment on PCR, and thank you for your question, David. So, PCR will never be more sensitive than the antigen, I think. That's the case for crypto. I think for histo, it will not be the case. If you think about PCR, you have to really choose the right specimen, and blood is obviously one easy specimen. I will discuss about that just after. But then I wanted to say that for the commercial issue, I discussed with a lot of companies trying to put my PCR, on the market and to have this bought by some of them. And what they said is that there is no recommendation for using PCR by WHO. And so as soon as there will not be any recommendation to use PCR, they will not go to develop those tests. So it's like a vicious cycle. So we have to think about it, before saying PCR will not be able to be done in many countries and many centers. You have to think about the fact that if you don't mention PCR, there will not be any commercial test, except small companies who want to really go for that. I'm sure INI is thinking about it. Some others, I hope so, but for sure it will be complicated. So we have to think about it, and I will show you some results.
And I think it's very important to follow the road that the Aspergillus working group for PCR have done. So they go together and distributed in centers, but we have a small study in Latin America. I didn't have time, the one that you are running in Europe, but we need bigger studies with protocols for the samples, because each sample has a different protocol. The gene target could be more than one, but we have to agree which one are we going to use. And when we have all this solid data, then we will have the interest of the commercial and maybe the also will recommend. I think that's the way to go.
So I have a question for Aude and Rita. So, okay, data we had before for implementation of the antigen tests mostly coming from Latin America, where we had a molecular diversity of Histoplasma by day. We only have Histoplasma capsulatum. So what do you think the fact that in Africa you have capsulatum and ribosy maybe is affecting the screening using the antigen test? And also, that's one of the findings you highlight in the recent publication done in Ivory Coast. No? Maybe that no association between positive results and immunotherapy and survival could be maybe associated to infections by H. capsulatum or ribosy. Maybe theories, or maybe it is more a false positive result, or maybe something related with the pathogen that is causing the infection.
I can just comment on the DNA more than antigen. So we had in our cohort where we developed the first PCR 4 cases of ribosy that were really well described. So the presentation is really different, as you know, And so the sample we got from those patients were always negative in blood, were always negative in deposited patients. Also, there were really a lot of lesions that were disseminated everywhere. So the disease is different. So for PCR, deposited will be negative in blood, that for sure. Antigen, I don't know because we didn't have that at that time. So that's something we really need to be done. But the number of cases in Africa is, and well described, is not so high. And we have to work on this, I think, in Africa. Many issues about it. Can I just say that antigen in front? At the meeting we had Serge from Côte d'Ivoire, he gave a talk, and he told me that he had 5 Depois cases, and they were all strongly antigen positive.
Remember, the antigen that is targeted is a galactomania. So that's one of the things. But don't forget, in the future research, we have characterized antigen with the antigen that also has 4 calories, we have the 70 kilocalories. In the future, we can improve with cocktails of antigens. I have been done. That's one of the future ideas.
Okay, I want to make a final point. And I don't think that a reference lab, I run a reference lab for 25 years. I found the reference labs around, and I don't think a reference lab much to should do diagnostics unless the turnaround times are similar as clinical laboratory. So otherwise, diagnostics are diagnostics, and if you are, because there is a patient behind that sample, and you need to be aware that the patient has the result as soon as possible, because the clinician needs to decide what is the best treatment for this. So I think reference labs can do diagnosis by taking into account the turnaround time. So than the clinical ones. And then we need more biomarkers. There is no doubt, but we need that the biomarkers are commercial. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to compare in different settings. Because in-house, it's very difficult to compare. So to get numbers, we need commercial systems. We need to abandon in-house systems as soon as they are good commercial system with sensitivities and specificity above 90%, which is the target. That's my opinion.
So with that, we will move to the next session. I believe that it's going to be on diagnostics, right? Access to modern diagnostics. So we need to bring up Guillermo.
Sorry, I would like to have an interview.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm from French Guiana, and I would like just to react about what I have heard about the molecular biology. I really think that molecular biology is very important for the tools of the diagnosis. In French Guiana, we use it regularly. We have put it for every patient. So you have a culture, and in parallel, we have put the molecular biology, and we do as well the direct examination. We stopped with the LFA because we had a lot of false positive, and because we use Aude, and we stopped it because we had really confusion because of the small bands, and it was very confusion for the clinician. But I think that first we have to point very, very strongly the training of the clinician, because they have to think about histoplasmosis every day. Each time they say the patient have to manage a patient, they have to think about it. And I think that it's very, very important to point about this, and after to have protocols of managed biological management with trying to do all the tools that you can have, the LFA, because I think that IMI is going to propose us one, or Mira Vista, the direct examination, because I think that it's important as well. We have to know that the amount of the parasite is very important, and as well the type of the samples. It is much more difficult in the CSF, but in the blood, in the LBA, in the lymph node. So, well, I think that for molecular biology, we really have to think about to put it in a tool that are necessary. I think that there are a lot of kits for molecular biology that is proposed, and I don't know why there is no kits for histoplasma, and I really think that it is possible to do it. There is, in French Guiana, we are considered as France, so it's really, we don't have the same, people have not the same vision of economic stages for us, but I really think that training of the clinicians is very important, and propose all the tools and include it as well in molecular biology.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you can. Better have the bell. Thanks. Microphones up there? Microphones up there? Right. Microphone. Okay. Let's go on. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to run this roundtable. We will start with Dr. Diego Falci from Porto Alegre, Brazil. Diego.
Thanks. Here I am again. And I would like to thank Alessandro and Antoine for the opportunity to have a second talk this meeting. I know this wasn't planned, but I appreciate the trust on me to this mission. So now we're going to talk about capacity of diagnostics and antifungals and therapeutics in Latin America. These are my disclosures. And I will begin, I know this was already presented, but I have to reinforce that in Manaus, the declaration came to an ambitious goal of 100% of countries in the Americas with access to antigen testing in 2025. As you can see, we haven't achieved this goal. We will give more detail on that. But in that occasion, they have made a questionnaire among the participants in the meeting, and many countries and regions reported no access to antigen testing in that opportunity. So we made afterwards, led by Alessandro, we made this survey, which was a survey about the capacity of diagnostic therapeutics in Latin America, as I told before. And we have found many deficiencies, a long way to go. I have to here to emphasize that antigen testing, access to antigen testing was at the occasion among the participants in the survey, 22%, so very low. And the survey was conducted in 2017 and 2018. About therapeutics, that occasion, when our survey, 129 institutions in Latin America, most from Brazil, and they reported access to liposomal erythropoietin B, which is a drug to treat histoplasmosis, as we all know. 49% of institutions reported access to liposomal erythropoietin B, and in Brazil even lower, 43%. Itraconazole was not good, also only 71% of access in those institutions in this sample. I know that we have mentioned many meetings of the Histoplasmosis advocacy group, but Alessandro has made also a meeting in Porto Alegre, which was a very wide meeting with many participants, some from abroad as well. But we were addressing most of problems of histoplasmosis in Brazil. But we had a manifesto, a declaration also in this meeting, and we advocated for better access to antigen testing and therapeutics in histoplasmosis. And many things have happened since then, so we decided to have an updated survey nowadays, more currently, obviously, but also more representative, since that previous survey was only 126 institutions, but mostly from Brazil. But in this new initiative, we aim to have more countries, more institutions from other countries in Latin America. We had a good support from PAHO and also other partnerships in order to include institutions from Focus Latam, ISHAM, and the Brazilian Society of Infectious Diseases. So these are preliminary data. The data collection was finished, but the data analysis was not undertaken in complete as well. So we have some data that will go into this database, mainly from Colombia and Peru. But in this preliminary analysis, we have 370 institutions. 31% from Brazil, and the others from other countries in Latin America, as you can see in the table. And in this survey, I think it's important to know that by the responders, Histoplasmosis was considered one of the most concerning pathogens, below Candida aspergillus and crypto, but above others. So 43% of the responders stated that Histoplasma is a concerning pathogen in their institutions. Most centers have access to microscopy and culture, but not serology. We saw that serology is not so essential for disseminated disease, but it is important for the chronic forms of the disease. And here we have only 47% of the institutions with access to serology. But here is the most important data that, from my perspective, in this survey, because we found that only 39.6% of Latin institutions reported access to histoantigen. So it's quite low. When you look at the goal that we had in the Manaus Declaration, we have a long way to go there to 100%. So this is the reality now, a very current survey. In Brazil, even lower, but we have improved. So that's important. That's important to know also, because we had 16% in Brazil and improved to 34% now. And Latam, all countries, 22% to 39%. So it's a progress, but we need much more. Regarding to therapeutics, we have advanced in the availability of liposomal tercin B. So now we have 50% of institutions with access to liposomal tercin B and 65% with access to itraconazole. So a little bit lower than the previous one. And TM for itraconazole, which is sometimes important for these patients for monitoring the treatment, with a very low availability of TDM, only 19%. When we look at the evidence of the availability of liposomal tercin B, we have to emphasize that this is probably because Brazil has improved access to antifungals. We have now an expanded program of antifungals in Brazil, who provides from the government, who provides the drug for the public health system. So we improved from Brazil from 43% to 61% of access to liposomal tercin B. So we have improved on that. Also, itraconazole almost the same as the previous service, 71% with low availability of TDM. So we still have a long way to go in expanding access to appropriate diagnosis of histo in Latin America. Even though antigen testing is available now, most institutions still don't have it, and it may be missing the histo detection. We have improved access due to governmental initiatives such as the Brazilian Endemic Mycosis Program, but we need to improve diagnosis as well, so we can use this program with more effectiveness. And this is my last slide. I would like again to thank Alessandro, who leads this project, and all the people that collaborated with us, all the other colleagues, and also all the colleagues that responded.
Great deal, right on time.
Well done, well done.
Alexander Lanio from Pasteur Institute Paris.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I will give you some data on what we did with our PCR, and thanks to maybe Alison. So this is the PCR we developed 10 years ago now. So we validated it in a prospective way in our lab, and we were quite happy with it. We compared the two different other assays in the literature, and we were better for one reason mainly, because we used artificial PCR, not only qPCR, meaning that we were able to identify RNA plus DNA. That's just not yesterday. So then the next step was for us to use it and see how it performs in a clinical trial, and especially with a follow-up. And obviously, Alessandro's trial was the perfect step for us to go on, and he was able to include specimens for us to screen those patients, and we had to use blood. That's something I wanted to highlight here. Blood, you never found blood, whole blood in biobanks. Always plasma or serum, because it's quite easy to collect, and whole blood never collected. So we have to think about it if we want to implement PCRs for many fungal infections in our trials. We have to think about whole blood rather than only plasma and serum. So we collected, so they collected in all those sites 105 patients. So EDTA blood from day 0 to day 14, let's say, only 4 patients at day 84. We screened, so mainly Aude did that at Pasteur. We extracted everything on our automated extractor with the optimized extraction procedures, and we did our PCR as we do routinely in our hospital. The first point I would like to give you here is to see that with the circles here, you see the percentage of positive qPCR, RT-qPCR at day 0, and then after the initiation of the treatment. And you see that you have a decrease from 65% to then 20% at day 40. And you see the rate in parallel of positive antigen. Almost all the patients had a positive antigen at inclusion, 93%, something like that. And the rate of positivity decreased at day 7 and day 40. So we never have an increase, a sensitivity of 100% in those patients. Antigen performed better. But for us, and from the previous study, we know that blood detection was associated with dissemination of the disease. And that's something we have to work on to really prove that there's a prognostic impact of having a positive PCR in blood. So if you look at the fungal load based on the CQ value, you see that at day 0, then you have a fungal load that is quite high, day 0, day 3, and then you treat the patient at day 0, and then you see that you have decreased fungal load. So in parallel, for having a decrease in the number of patients that are positive, you have also a decrease in the fungal load in those who have still a positive detection at day 14, for example. Here is the individual points we had for those patients. So we only had these 56 patients analyzed up to the out 100, because all of them had several time points, and we excluded the other ones for calculations. And so the idea was to then calculate, as in the crypto world, the type of EFA, but based on the fungal load, meaning an increased fungal load, a decreased fungal load, or really flat as a creme brulee. So what we observe here is that a flat or a negative EFA was really associated with mortality at day 7. Of course, it's a small effective, small number of patients, and not at all adjust on the age, etc. But still, we have some signal showing that if you have an increased fungal load, you will get probably more mortality, meaning that the patient is not controlled by the antifungal drug. I will skip this one, but when we look at the fungal load also in patients who were negative at day 7 or positive at day 7 in terms of PCR, here, you see that those who were positive at day 7 had a very high fungal load at day 0. So the fungal load at day 0 is also something quite important and drives the decrease of the fungal load under treatment. And then when we looked at the different arms of the study, we had a decrease that was quite similar in the 3 different arms, so showing that in terms of microbiology, at least with DNA, we did not see any differences in the control of the microbiology biomarker, the microbiological biomarker. So to conclude, this quantitative PCR really could help identifying the patient with higher fungal load at day 0, and potentially having a positive blood marker at day 0 in blood in comparison to antigen could be at least one prognostic marker. We have to work on it. And then analyzing the decrease of the fungal load at day 7 would help also to identify those patients at risk, and potentially in those patients, and same for crypto, those patients you could imagine giving a second dose of high dosage glucosamine. This is science fiction, but still we can think about this kind of thing using this kind of pseudo-quantitative or quantitative tools. So stratification based on the qPCR or the antigen is something we have to consider in the future, and I heard a lot of talks in this kind of perspective. So I'd like to thank you very much for that attention.
Thanks, Alexander. Well, the next speech is going to be by Verweij from Utrecht, Netherlands.
I need to present it this way, sorry. Yeah, so I'm from Western Institute in the Netherlands, and I will present our work on the endemic mycosis working group. Now she's there. It's an initiative from Europe, and we would like to enhance the diagnosis of epidemiology knowledge in mycosis. Well, we all know this figure with the endemic mycosis, so let's check this. These are the commercial assays that know for histoplasmosis. Most of them are serology based, and well, I would like to talk about the molecular part of this course. Unfortunately, nothing is available, as already mentioned earlier by one of the persons who asked societies. There's nothing available for histoplasma commercially. So we need to my presentation. Let's see now. This is interesting. This is not a good one. Wait, most of the, oh, this is interesting for me. So most of the, so we set up a working group focusing on setting up all these diagnostic tests. So we are with 4 people. And I'm number 5. Unfortunately, Wilma and University stepped out, so there are now 4 reference laboratories in Europe that are focusing on diagnosis of endemic mycosis, and of course you're here for Histoplasma. So this was one of the slides I presented earlier this week. We investigated literature for available assays, And our 5 teams focus on qPCRs, probably one of those 5 reference steps that are only the availability of one fungal PCR. So in this figure, I can show you that the outcome of the qPCR was with mostly the mitochondria targeting assays were way sensitive than the ribosomal targeting assays. And well, the outcome of the fungal PCR, the conventional PCR, was even worse with the panel that we had. And of course, there are many more factors that influence the qPCR assays, for example, the master mix and the machine that is used for running the diagnostics. This one doesn't. It's relevant for this talk. So what's next with the working group on endemic and molecular diagnostics? We would like to invite people from outside Europe to join us. I keep on saying this, please send me an email and join our team, especially from the areas where histoplasmosis is endemic. We would like to send out first a survey, not only specifically to this external quality assessment panel for histoplasmosis, but also to the other endemic process. We would like to get data and then at the end set up a study, an international study, also in South America and Africa, to find out what the best assay is, molecular assay is to detect histoplasma. Well, then my take on this. In my slides that I prepared for this talk, that are on my laptop, I mentioned several new molecular assays that were developed, and the majority of them are focusing on HCV 100 and single targets. And it's really specific for histoplasma. I would like to stress out, please, if you want to set up something new that is not yet published, go for a multi-copy target, for example, mitochondria or ribosomal DNA. That was my main message from that talk, and also that many environmental studies to detect histoplasma in the environment, they focus on nested PCRs that are really prone for contamination. So my message is please use a qPCR approach. There are so many assays now in the literature, but we need to find out which assay is the best. That is a community effort, in my opinion, for which we can use our network with the ECMM. Dus again, please send an email if you want to join. And we hope to present our outcome of the survey at the Transmedical Oncology meeting in Dubai in September. And hopefully we get willing to create and ship the external quality assessment panels to participate in laboratories. And we are already teaming with ISHAM working with thermal diagnostics, and I need to reach out to the fungal PCR as well. And with that, I'm at the end of my
everyone you can use the web. Okay, so questions? I have one if you let me. When perhaps I miss it, but when you use antigen, urine antigen or blood, for example, as a sample, for follow-up patient or for screening, do you establish a volume of blood to be used and a retention time in urine specific? I don't know if you have retention time, I mean, like, for example, you have to have an urine with 3 hours of retention or 5 hours of retention, so you have to change the antigen concentration, I don't know that. And with the blood, the volume, if you establish the volume.
Yes, thank you very much. I can also for blood only because urine has been done in the labs, so Alessandro can answer that. For blood, we are using the maximum volume we can use, meaning 500 microliters for all the follow-up, and we need to stick with this to really be able to quantify properly the decrease of the fungal of course. That's something quite easy in blood. In CSF for crypto, it was this complicated because then you need to really have the same volume each time, and it's complicated. But for here, for histo, you can go for 1 ml if you want. The machine is able to extract 1 ml, but you have to do the same each time. And for the urine, done in your study, Alessandro, the urine were processed the same way at the beginning and follow-up. So I think there is, of course, you need to really use the standardized protocol when you do so.
Diego? Question for Diego. So, Diego, you mentioned that in the most updated survey, the availability of the antigen test now is 39% in the participant laboratories. But what is the proportion by country? Because, for example, comparing with the Manaus Declaration, at the time we had countries like Brazil or Mexico, where they reported that they didn't have access to the antigen test. But, for example, talking from IMI, in the recent years, the company has established distributor in those countries, and also right now the antigen test is available and also registered in most of the countries where the registration is needed. No? So you know that information, not based in the total number of laboratories, just talking about that at least available in a reference lab or one lab in the country.
I understood. We don't have this type of analysis now. We still don't have it. But yes, that's a very important question because you may be not having your institutions, but your country has access. So we did not have, we still don't have this type of analysis, but probably I can present that in a moment or in the paper.
Yeah, because I think that's something important because even in the current days, I hear people that say, no, I have no access. Because it's not registered, but the product is registered in the country. And usually the registration process could be longer, no? For example, some countries like Mexico register a product at ID could take 2 or 3 years. So yeah. It's important that people know that, no?
I agree with you, but some institutions, I can say this from Brazil, it's a very heterogeneity into institutions. So maybe some institution has in Brazil, but the institution does not have the access. So Brazil, it's a very huge country, it's a continent. So maybe you have in the south and in the northeast you don't have, or maybe in some institutions particularly you don't have it because of other issues. The funding is not good and the test is not standardized at the hospital. So we try to also to give this snapshot of the particular problems of the institutions. But yes, I agree with you. We can present this data as a country, and we can obviously see where are the countries that still don't have access to antigen testing. Thank you, Guillermo.
Dr. Meaning?
I wanted to make some comments about the declaration, whatever it's called and wherever it's from, based on some thoughts, because I think we're not going to have a lot of time to talk about it. So first of all, I think we should exclude divorce. So it shouldn't be active. Secondly, I think we need to have some research elements in it. So I talked about chronic pulmonary. So I think that is a differential diagnosis. We need much more research in this area that we haven't got. So I think there are some research elements. And I think many of the comments here illustrate some of those research elements that need to go in. Freddie talked about health systems. There's a load of stuff about research, implementation research as well. I think a third area is whether we do want to recommend antifungal therapy for everybody with antigen positivity. If in fact ARV therapy is as good as antifungal therapy. And I don't think we understand that well enough myself. So what I think a very clear recommendation is to start antiretrovirals. And some of these countries don't have antiterrorists. They don't have interferons. So how do we address that? So maybe the 80% or 90% figure is acceptable, but I think there's a whole piece around ARV interaction and antiretroviral interaction which needs addressing and quite carefully addressing. And then I think there's another whole part of this, which is about latency and chronicity and other elements, which I don't think we understand very well either, epidemiology and so on. So I think we have a lot of time to discuss this because of all the very useful information that's been presented, but I do think this is going to need quite a lot of thought to make it a global, useful, and have it really stick as a very specific recommendation.
Dr. Elena?
No, I'm sorry, I'll be back to the PCR, just to comment on what I showed. So it was based on a very limited number of patients, and so we need to validate that. And Alessandro was really wanting to use the qPCR in the cohort of the 600 patients, sorry, to really follow and have the power to really see the impact of the qPCR on this.
So going back to David Denning's comment, I mean, I would note that the targets are targeted inpatients, and so hospitalized patients who are presumably sick, as opposed to outpatients, where what to do with that is a little bit different. So I kind of like that.
Finally, looking at the picture here, can I suggest that instead the screen we can use diagnostics as a word, because perhaps now knowing Diego stats, perhaps the one lab don't have the antigen, but at least have the microscope, and perhaps using the word diagnosis, because the screen seems only with antigen. Okay?
Yes. So we took it into account. So this is because some of we was living it. So we were just we changed a little according to the first comments. It's ISHAM histotargets. It's no longer aggressive. And so we put symptomatic at-risk individuals, 90% tested, 90% antifungals, 90% survival.
Ambitious.
Yeah, more ambitious. Yeah. I think what we want to impact is survival. And if we go like this, it means so that by the end we have 73% of survival. Yeah. Which is the proportion. So, is there any comments? No? Is it better for you?
Yeah. Yep.
You better took this?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Nice. Okay. Cool. May we go to the last session before everybody's asleep or leave?
What's the time frame? Is it 5 years? You get 25?
2030.
That's you're in Africa. That's
yes.
I don't think I have to.
Do you think we will reach it tomorrow or we need it for tomorrow? We need it for tomorrow. Yeah, but it's a new way to frame the targets, including survival.
I mean, we do need aspirational targets, but we don't want unrealistic things. I mean, you know, there's almost no testing in India, there's almost no testing in Indonesia, and they have no HIV. So, you know, we publish this at the end of 2025. You're saying in 4 years you're going to get to that? No chance. No chance.
Maybe we will see according to the regions or countries, or we can frame the evaluation.
So maybe something that might not match to this comment that David is saying is that we at WHO had a very big challenge. This is ladies and this is another topic, which is I use my other hat. I used to coordinate and work a lot on mother-tongue transmission of HIV, where we have these goals, and then of course for certain parts of Latin America,
that we were able to achieve, most of you maybe do not know, we have the countries who are starting to do elimination of monoclonal transmission of HIV. First country in the world was Cuba, like close parentheses. But what we did to sub-Saharan Africa, which had another perspective, is that we put like intermediate progress, but we had to say, you have achieved to a bronze medal, or you have achieved to a silver medal. And then you have, of course, there will be countries, hopefully in 5 years, in Latin America, which I know more now, where we can have gold medal. So you see, you have gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal, something like that. So because we cannot say, because we need to have these goals, even if we're not 100% achievable, but we have to give prizes to the countries, gold medal, silver medal, bronze medal. So I put that on the table for a future discussion.
But we have started to frame the evaluation, and so we have to discuss also with this advanced database. And then we can see how we frame the denominators of countries, centers, the evaluation regions, whatever. We will see. We will see if we manage also to evaluate this, because it's not that easy. But I think I'm taking the ambitious one.
Yeah, right.
We need a vision. So.
But that may be your gold medal. Your bronze medal may just be you have access in the country.
Yeah.
The test.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Hold on, everyone. Last session. I'm Gordon Brown from the UK. This is my co-chair, Rita. And sessions on Histoplasmosis training capacity to action. And first up, we have Aude from Brazil.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to deviate a little bit from the thoughts we've been hearing so far to bring you an update on the molecular epidemiology of histoplasmosis and a few considerations regarding its impact in clinics. So over the past few years, researchers have been trying to uncover the secrets of histoplasmosis genetics, but it was not until 2016 by Dr. Teixeira and his colleagues, which successfully established the existence of at least 17 predictive lineages, if you can see there, which are also distributed worldwide and seem to be heavily influenced by geography, which you can also see by the name of the place there. And in this work, they also proposed 6 new phylogenetic traits, genetic species, sorry, and showed evidence of gene flow among Latin American plates, which you can see on the bottom there. Well, a year later, 5 of these plates were elevated to the species level, and now we have 5 main species. As follows. So Histoplasma have HCPNC, which are endemic to North America. We have Histoplasma, which is endemic across Latin America. We have maintained the original nomenclature for gender. Well, okay. So we have Histocapsulatum sensitive, which contain the original Aude, and we also have an African plate, also known as Histoplasma Verweij. And you can see that the amount of genetic variation on the missing plot captures the genetic variation captures substantial of about 83% between populations. And from that, you can see a clear difference among these populations. So narrowing down to Brazil, we know that this place is a highly endemic country for histoplasmosis, as this map from 2019 shows us. What is interesting is the diversity of histogenotypes we found within Brazil. So in this particular study, we found among other isolates, isolates from Latin American pea clay, as well as Histoplasma capsulatum stricto sensu. But most importantly, they identify strong evidence for a Rio de Janeiro specific clay in which we don't see any admixture with other histoplasma populations. They also try to compare the symptoms of the patients with distinct genotypes, as you can see on the columns there, but they didn't find any significant difference in terms of clinical data. And as we have previously seen, another study performed in Brazil provided us with valuable data regarding the circulating histospecies in the Amazon basin. So from a cohort of local patients, 6 genotypes were detected, and as indicated by the arrows, with the description of 2 novel genotypes, those being Amazon 1 and 2. And in this particular study, more than half of the cases were caused by the MC5-like genotype, which would represent isolates closely related to the Colombian lineage. In addition, the male to female ratio was 14:1, which is a highly expressive number. That is the Histoplasmosis stricto sensu population. And also, this plot here shows the age range affected by each clade, in which you can see that the Amazon, one genotype seems to affect most likely the younger people, while the MC5 presents a broader range when it comes to age. And this is a study I was able to contribute with. And in this study, we defined that indeed the 2 species causing disease in the US are Histoplasma uhaense and Mississippiense. But curiously, you can see that within Histoplasma uhaense, we don't see any branches, while in Mississippiense, we see a branching indicating a clade 1, the existence of a clade 1 and clade 2. And you can see that the clade 2 is composed of only by clinical isolates, whereas the clade 1 is comprised by isolates from all sources, right? Those being clinical, veterinarian, and environmental. And we think that the clade 1 might have some kind of adaptation which facilitates the infection of pets, for example, which have a higher body temperature than humans on average. And we also see some cases of Histoplasmosis ISHAM within the United States. And from that, now we can see that histogenotype distribution across the USA. We plotted our results in the map published by the CDC. And what we can see is that Histoplasma uhaense is mostly prevalent in the eastern part of the US, where we saw sporadic cases in the northwestern part, while meanwhile, Histoplasma mississippiense is mostly found in the midwestern states, and we see some cases caused by Histoplasma sudamericana in California and Texas, but those are most likely imported cases. And now, moving away from the Americas, a study from India revealed the presence of a monophyletic clade, which is surprisingly related to the North American lineages. And this PCA plot strongly suggests that the India clade harbors enough interspecific genetic variability, to stand out as its own species. But we need more phenotypic studies with this genotype to understand its clinical implications. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data from Africa, but some talks at this event show that a great effort is in progress to change that scenario, as shown by Dr. Governor and other speakers. But nonetheless, we know that history is highly endemic in Africa, and hopefully future studies will shed light on the circulating genotypes on this continent. So we've all seen this before, Histoplasma ohanense. Those are some phenotypical differences we see. Histoplasma ohanense presents a smooth colony compared to the others, and Recipiense presents proteinuria activity compared to the others. And finally, as my take-home message, genomics has transformed our view of histoplasma, revealing a complex of cryptic species with distinct geographical patterns and significant population diversity. Early evidence suggests that genotypic differences impact virulence and antifungal resistance. So the future challenge and opportunity lie in collaboration to link this wealth of molecular data to concrete clinical outcomes, thus improving the diagnosis and treatment of histoplasmosis. And last but not least, I want to thank all the people that work with me at the Tropical Medicine Center at the University of Leclere, led by Dr. Max Teixeira, and our collaborators across the world and in funding agencies. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernardo. We'd like to call up the next speaker, which is Alan Ramirez, who's going to talk about pathophysiology and relevant targets.
Just check since see people that have problems. Just see. Okay, I'll be busy. First of all, I'd like to thank Alessandro for the invitation and Pablo as well for bringing me here. Well, at first, I got the invitation to come and talk about pathophysiology. I was like, that would be crazy to do that in 8 a.m. something, but I'll try it.
7 now.
7 now. So then I'm just going to skip some slides. People already talk about a lot about epidemiology and all that. So I just brought some information showing that the max2 overlaps at the time, but it is important. But anyway, let's just skip that. And so some of you already heard about also the risk factors and all that. So there's another slide that I can skip. And okay, so since we're talking about the physiology of histoplasma, we know that's the dimorphic fungi. We need to understand how this fungi reacts to the today's phase of infection, right? Of infection. So many groups already describe the importance of many factors involved in this phenomenon. Some of them from the group of Dr. Bruce Klein, they describe the importance of this transcription factor called VLK1, which actually control the expression of some virulence factors such as the CBP and the HS1. And later on, the group of Professor Rita still described the importance of this family of transcription factors, RYP 1 to 3. And they also control the expression of many virulence factors, including catalase, CBP, some heat shock proteins, and superoxide nucleotides. The main point to take on from this slide here is that isolates from different plates, they adapt differently to higher temperature. That should be something, right? Well, it's the final thing, the host. Actually, the first line of defense we have, it is called the collectins, the surfactant proteins, mainly the A, K, T. So they attach the surface of the plasma to fungus. And we already know that knockout animals for these two SPA and G proteins, they're most susceptible to disease, right? Not only that, so during the infection, at first, histoplasma needs to interact with the innate cells, right? And the most important so far that we know is the macrophage. And histoplasma actually gets recognized by macrophage that uses the serotonin receptors here, as you can see. Sorry.
I keep confusing, but sorry. And it does that so by engaging the CR3. So I think some time ago showed that histoplasma first is recognized by the C18 molecule on the surface of the macrophages, and then the C11 begets recruiting to this sites of interaction here through the formation of lipid microdomains in the surface of the macrophages. And later on, the group, other groups shown that actually that acts together in collaboration with the DAXI1. DAXI1 is an important receptor on the innate immunity that recognize the beta-1 glucan on the surface of macrophages, right? And the important thing in this study was also that they stated that animals knock out first the 11B and the DAXI1, they were more susceptible to disease as well. And so, Histoplasma is recognized by the DAXI as well. And to escape that recognition, the fungus can produce an alpha-1 glucan layer, right? And it's been demonstrated already when this layer is actually, when knockouts are made in AHS1 protein, which actually produces the alpha-1 glucan, histoplasma is easily killed by macrophages. And to escape this recognition, the food is able to also express that glucan is called ANG1, that actually shaves off the beta-1 glucan on the histoplasmic surface, and then it renders it to a less virulent phenotype that gets killed by macrophages really easily. And just continuing here, then, when histoplasma gets inside the macrophage, actually, it needs to survive against the reactive oxygen species, and it does that so by expressing superoxide dismutase and also catalase. Catalase specifically was shown some time ago that it gets expressed on the surface of the fungus, it gets secreted in vesicles as well. So the fungus really protects itself against these reactive oxygen species. And, well, just to summarize here, then histoplasma can interact with macrophages, right? And you can skip this recombination by expressing the alpha-1 glucan, but using the HSP6 again, you can get inside the macrophage without activating the cells, right? And then it gets disseminated to other parts of the body. But the lymphatic cells are able to kill the macrophages, and then they present the antigens for the CH1 cells, which in turn they secrete interferon gamma. So this is well known. And not only interferon gamma is important, but TNF also has been proved by the group of Professor T that it can actually control the formation of granuloma. Right? So these two cytokines are the main cytokines against immune responses. Well, the group of doctors, Pascal and Falci, they've shown that patients receiving 10-alpha inhibitors, they're actually more susceptible to more. So it makes total sense, right? And so, regarding the B-cell response, we know that local animals for B-cells, they're more susceptible to disease, and the antibody levels increase after infection, right? But still, we don't have not much information regarding the importance of these antibodies in protection. Only by gene immunization, by giving antibodies against the antigen, for example, or antibodies against the antigen, right? Also the HTP, histone-like protein, and also the HSP6 on the surface of macrophages. So they were all protected, as you can see here, they enhance the protection, and now they lead to lung, spleen, and liver clearance of them. And not only that, so since I spoke to you that these polysaccharides on the surface of the macrophages are important for the recognition of the immune system, what if we target these polysaccharides also with antibodies? And you all know, you heard from the talk of our supporter, that's really hard to make antibodies against this molecule, so we came up with the idea of constructing some lectin Fc fusion approaches to target these antibodies. this polysaccharide, sorry, and actually we see a really nice protection. The enhancement of the survival of the animals and also fungal clearance and all the options we evaluate. And so just to finish up here, so the whole story, we did an eating approach. The strategy I brought us through here that will be actually converted in my lab, and Dr. Falci also showing like some regimens of antifungals that are being used. We still need more drugs to use osmosis, right? And just to speak this information because it was already talking here. So, to understand better the pathogenesis, we do need nutrient collection in the plasma, and we don't have that, right? And as innovative therapies, we need to better combination of antifungals. We need novel antifungals per se, such as voriconazole or tetrazole, which are being tested against Histoplasma, right? And to understand the genetic susceptibility to severe disease by how the pattern recognition receptor actually first sight recognizing Histoplasma. And new prophylaxis measures such as vaccine and immunization, but we heard from Josh Stock and Stu Stock yesterday that no fungal vaccine yet. So we're still in the search for that. And some adjunctive therapies as well, such as cytokines such as interferon and TNF work on this Histoplasmosis model. And just to finish up the whole thing that Luis been talking about already, so I'm gonna kind of skip this information, right? But again, I wanna thank Alessandro and Aude for the invitation for me to come here to talk to you about the pathogenic of Histoplasmosis. Thank you.
I'd like to invite our last speaker to the working group is Melissa Xavier, and she's going to tell us about what we can learn from Histoplasmosis.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here. I have the responsibility to answer this question. That is the one that Professor Alessandro asked me to talk about. So I'm going to talk about what can we learn from histoplasmosis in animals. Histoplasmosis occurs worldwide, not only in humans, but also in domestic and wild animals, of course, everyone here knows. And there are some kind of animals that develop specific clinical presentations of histoplasmosis, like horses, on which we highlighted the zoonotically fungitis. But on the other side, we have a disseminated disease that is common in cats and dogs, and even showing lesions, skin lesions. So these are diseases that is very similar to the human histoplasmosis. And also in agreement to what we see in histoplasmosis, the culture has, the culture have no sensitivity, and then we need the antigen detection in the urine. But as we are discussing here, if we don't have access to antigen detection in humans, you can imagine in animals. So in a major perspective, we can learn more in this sense, that is using animals as sentinels of the presence of the fungi in different geographic places. Because as we discussed here today, the animals do not travel like us humans, then they are the best model to the infection, to be infected in that region that is living. So here is a paper from the group of Oladele showing the infection of animals, and with this showing that we have the spread of the disease in all of the country. This is also have been done with in other countries and other continents, in Europe, animals study with histoplasmosis in animals have been contributing to a better understanding of these different kinds of regions that were not the commonest regions describing histoplasmosis are now with a lot of cases in animals. And the paper that Bernardo showed now, looking in regard to the genotypes, we can understand a lot, not only the geographic distribution of the fungi, but also the chain transmission of this infection. Bats that are well-known dispersers of histoplasma, they are recent review from the beginning showing that more and more species of bats have been identified as infected with histoplasma, and also contributing to know that this fungus lives in other countries than it was already described. So this is the last point that I want to highlight. Also, it was a recent first detection of histoplasma in the Antarctic continent. I think we have a lot of questions here. First of all, it is a place that has completely different climatic characteristics that are those described for the habitat, natural habitat of histoplasma. So we have cold temperatures and everything else. From these 5 samples that were positive in this study, 3 were from penguin species. These were interesting thing to know. And another thing that I want to highlight here is that the genotype that were found in this paper is correlated with the genotype of the Latin America histoplasmosis already described. So there is an integration that I put here. That we need to have a lot of more studies to answer. If seabirds can also be dispersers, as we already know regarding bats and other birds that are already described. So we have work with the Center of Marine Animals Rehabilitation in the southern Brazil, and we work a lot with these penguins, but more regarding aspergillosis. So here we can put a good interrogation: what does this infection with histoplasma can tell us? So here, to answer the question, I'm okay in the time. To answer the question, what can we learn from histoplasmosis in animals? I put some take-home messages together. Is that infected animals showing that histoplasma geography boundaries are more extensive than historically considered. Molecular epidemiology of histoplasma isolates from animals are helping us to a better understanding of the possible origin and transmission routes of histoplasma. This is an interesting paper also that I bring here to this third take-home message or conclusion or remark from my topic, is that it's already had been reported a case exported of a cat infected with histoplasma that were infected, probably in Texas, and developed the disease in Europe. So the transportation of infected pets can contribute to export and import distinct genotypes. And this was already described in another endemic fungi, that's Perspectives brasiliensis, that everyone knows. So as the last take-home message, the principal one is that we also need to improve the diagnosis of histoplasmosis in animals, and not just to save lives and other lives, but also to contribute to a better understanding of human exposure and infection. So we also need to put the histoplasmosis in the One Health context, because we are going to have great advance in the knowledge when we were looking to all of the three pillars together in this sense. So as I have 1 minute yet, our lab is working with samples from Antarctica. We are starting a project with this, and we are trying to get a grant to also study Histoplasma in these samples. And we also have the surveillance of all of the babies that arrived in our region and are arrested to rehabilitation. We have a permanent systematic partnership with these centers that we can also do the surveillance and the investigation of Histoplasma. And this is for the next steps, the results that I had should have the opportunity to share with you. So thank you so much. Thanks for everyone for attention, and many Pastor for the invitation.
So we have some time for questions, and I want to ask the first question if I may. Melissa, I can ask the first question. Melissa, I have the first question.
Here, there.
So I was a little bit concerned about histoplasmosis in penguins in Antarctica, and I was wondering whether you have any evidence that the detection of the disease there is linked to human activity in Antarctica or with other nations.
Yeah, questions and then concluding remarks.
We have a lot of questions with this detection. We even don't know which is only DNA that were carried there. We don't have the isolate or even the isolate.
Not sure, I think.
It's
clear. Yes, I think.
But do not survive there because
Let's go back. That's
of the high exposure to the sun. We don't have this answer. We want to advance in the studies to try to answer. I hope I can try. I can answer a little bit more in the next years.
Any more questions for anyone? I have another question for both Bernardo and Ellen. It's a combined question about epidemiology, strains, and the alpha-glucan, which is the major release factor of histoplasma. Whether there's any evidence between different strains of histoplasma having different levels of alpha-glucan.
Well, this is something that is just investigated by several groups. From what we know so far, like doing like just studies with like a few number of samples, we do see a difference in terms of alpha-glucan.
Does that correlate with pathogenicity at all?
Not really, not really. That's the point. Because one of the main strains that we actually use, to do these neurological studies actually bears no alpha-1,3 glucan.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Can I just point one thing regarding Melissa's presentations? Well, she brought up, the one health concept. So we should also pay attention to this, but that's the environment as well, right? Because over there, the fungus interact with a lot of other hosts as well. And we've shown already that it interacts with like free-living amoeba as well, and it gets more virulent upon this interaction. So I think we should take like the whole concept of one health, the big picture.
Absolutely, and of course, animals will be spreading around areas where there's still been protected more.
Hi, it's talking about the environment. Do you people see any variation in the frequency of histoplasmosis along the year, or according to any different season, rains? What do you can anyone comment on this? Because sometimes it just disappear, and then we get a lot of cases. So what happens with history in the environment? No.
I remember there is some reports about histoplasmosis outlets in Venezuela related with rainy season and floodings. Yeah, like related to the natural disaster, no?
just a comment on that. We know that histoplasmosis is associated with a very low latency, and then in immunoconfirmed patients, and then it reactivates when the patient is not. And we have some cases in France, like 50 years between the exposure in Africa and reactivation in France. So then the seasonality is more like associated probably with acute infections in immunocompetent patients, right?
Just to comment on seasonality, we look at the, because we have a cohort in FungiCAM, actually the cohort since 1992. And so we had some histo cases because we have a mycology lab since 1995. So we have histo cases among HIV people. And so we show so that there is an inter-annual variation and intra-annual variation in the number of cases. And we were trying to answer the question, so is it new infection or reactivation? And so we use time series, and we only use environmental data, so the temperature, the level of rain, humidity. And so we were able to predict more than 70% of real clinical cases just using environmental data. So these environmental data, so temperature, rain, and humidity. Yeah, so according to the variation, we were able to predict the observed cases. So this is more in favor of new infection, because it means there are. And so when we look at the period of time over 1 year in French Guiana, we have a long rain season, short dry season, and then short wet season, and then a long dry season. And so we can see so that most of the cases come during the dry season with the latency of exposure that came to clinical case, and the clinical cases came to the doctor after a latency also. And so we have lags, and in these models, time series we can use lags. And so we have a clear seasonality. It's linked to human exposure. When it's dry, you go to those places, you work, and you expose yourself, and then you. So in an endemic region like this, we have seasonality for cases.
Let's have one more question. I think we need to move on. Yeah, one more.
Hi, Lotte Brown from the UK. I was really struck, Claire, by your presentation on emerging mycosis and the progress that's been made in basic science research for a relatively newer pathogen. And I just wondered what people's opinions were on the research priorities for basic science and pathogenesis of histoplasmosis, and how more progress can be made in that area.
Well, that's a tough.
Well, it's difficult to work with, for example, because it's in 3. And that's what's the restriction we face, but probably based on it. Yeah.
Well, I must say that's a really tough question. But it is information-based research, right? Because if that drives our knowledge, we generate more question every time we get like a nice result, right? Yeah, I think that's still the case. Yes.
I agree.
Okay, everyone. I think I'll ring it down one last time. Presentation and hand over to yourself. Simon.
So, this is just to thank you all for participating in this great meeting. This, to me, was quite exciting to see all of you here interacting and discussing deep on several topics. And we go back to that slide. So we need to finish this with a call for action. This is the idea. We need to write, in the end, a statement paper summarizing what we discussed here, but saying what we want for the future. So anyone who would like to comment on this, again, it's open for you, please, to say your final thoughts. Just reminding that this is being recorded and transmitted online.
So we're going to use artificial intelligence to recover all this data and information to summarize this. You're going to start, Antoine?
I think we already talked about this, so maybe if there is a last comment or...
Antoine doesn't want any discussion, he wants to
I think
I'm also happy with that. So
we came to a kind of consensus, so some people are more ambitious, others more realistic. I think we need to be ambitious, and then once we'll do the kind of evaluation, we will temper the results according to the settings or from where we were starting and where we are. But we need trends, and we need results as trends. So we need to collect information. So we have to work on this quite quick and frame the evaluation very quick in order to have trends. I think it's better to know if it is going better, because this is how Diego Falci presented the results. If you give a number, it doesn't mean nothing. You need a trend. Is it going like this? Is it stable? Is it worse? I think we need to work on this.
So I really like Popper's suggestion of a sort of bronze, silver, gold, and this may be the gold medal, maybe it's platinum or something. So, but because then it gives you a roadmap of for the country of how they're doing. Because a country could look at this, or someone could say like, oh, this is unrealistic. I'm not even gonna get there. So why even try? But if you have like, oh, you know, Colombia's bronze, but you know, Brazil's silver, like there's some internal competition, and sort of with your peers in the region and in the country, and you give people a roadmap of where you're going. So if bronze is have access in the country to the test, and this is gold, then there's probably silver that's somewhere in between.
I fully agree. But I think what we need to do once we digest all this is to put together some intermediate targets that can be linked to this silver, gold, and then take it from there. And because I do think that countries, even though they have much more to do, like in some sub-Saharan countries, they need to have certain ambition to move on in targets. So of course, I would agree on that.
Right. You see, we moved from inpatients to symptomatic at-risk individuals, so it's broad. And that would include all forms of histoplasmosis, not only the disseminated form. Any additional comments?
I do still. So I think one challenge we have is once we agree on something linked to different targets, we need to be clear and how we're going to disseminate this information. Let's say from the Baja region, of course, it's going to be Latin America and the Caribbean, but we need, and we can help, but we need to understand well the need to disseminate to different regions. Because if we want to make this global, not only Latin America, the dissemination and implementation and the usefulness of these targets at different regions, different sub-regions would be very important.
All right. Well, I think so. The devil is in the details. So yeah, I think it's good to have a vision, and then you can have sub targets, sub priorities by evaluation region or maybe, but there should be a vision like this, right? More at the evaluation time. But because then we didn't define what is tested, for example. Tested, is it PCR, is it mycology, conventional mycology, is it antigen? And it will go to many details. So I'm not sure that's really easy. Or we can go from where we are now and where we want to go after, according to some regions. But in many regions, we don't have any baseline data. So maybe in the end, we can give a kind of a medal, because you came from here and you go there. And so we need to implement the framework of evaluation. This is the biggest challenge. And then have a baseline and move to medals for giving realistic objectives. But we need to have the vision. When the WHO pushed for HIV 90-90-90, in many places it was unrealistic. But in the end, we moved to 95-95-95. So even if we think it's unrealistic now, I think we should do this way.
Yeah. So one challenge is that we've gone from something that's actually measurable, which is, in patients with advanced HIV, to something that is now, perhaps it's more aspirational, but it's not measurable. Because how can we quantify the number of symptomatic at-risk patients? There's not a clear denominator that's easy to measure. And although I agree that this is, probably more, the definition of who's at risk is more inclusive. And I think we agree that we don't want to encourage screening of asymptomatic patients at this point. But on the other hand, we want to encourage something that is, where the targets are actually, and the progress is measurable.
And I think so symptomatic, as I was saying before, is that maybe we could engage teams working on transplant, teams working in rheumatology, hematology, HIV. This was, and then I think the devil is in the details, but we will see for the evaluation. So maybe we will have more reliable disease in a subpopulation at risk, and we will look at this way at that time. But as a call for action, maybe we should be broader. And it's, yes, it's kind of a dream, but dreams helps to work. So
yeah, but you had this dream before, right?
Yeah,
100% tested by 2025.
Yeah.
So it's not like just putting the target. I mean, how do we get there? I know the purpose of this document is not to explain to people how to get there. It's just to put the target. But we could use any number, 80, 90, 100. The Swiss very ambitious. Most difficult part is how do we get there? Particularly in the public sector.
But this, I think, the action plan couldn't be done in the context of a meeting like we organized today. We need subgroup, focus group, and it should be tailored, like the initiative of the WHO of tailoring the fungal priority list with a small number of action for each fungal disease, according to access to treatment, access to diagnostics, surveillance, whatever. So they asked us to do this. So this is really the plan for action that will come out from the WHO about Histo in the fungal priority list. But we could do also a focus group on the next meeting, or because this is how we did it in Manaus. We had a focus group. We were working on strength, weakness, threats, opportunities. So we came out with a kind of a call for action, but with actions that could be done according to the system, healthcare system, and else. So I think today is more statements of where we are, where we want to go, and maybe we can call also for a plan for action through the initiative in PAHO, or we done this with
Yeah, and this is just the first meeting we have. So maybe from here we start doing something more in. Moving to more discussions and so what the Histo group wants to do in the future. We need to establish more collaboration and start working together. So I think that's why I think this meeting was so important. And for sure, the best part of ISHAM.
Yeah, I think the group needed to survive to this. So probably
it sucks, that was hard, but we needed so many people to come with their ideas also.
So probably the people should send any ideas that they have so that the group can reach the objectives that were sent by Alessandro to the group. So we maybe can have some subgroup seminars online, whatever. So, but it also came from the group. So it's not one people or two people deciding what's going on. It's maybe coming from you. So maybe we can do a short questionnaire within the group to ask people, so how do you want to go further within the group? Because in 2028, in Cape Town, hopefully we'll do another meeting. And so
you need to make progress within this period of time.
Yeah, maybe we need more meetings like this. We have done several meetings in Brazil, and we were expecting to have a meeting in Panama. We need to go to other countries, not only Brazil, and not only Porto Alegre. Need to go. There is a suggestion of having a meeting in Rio or other places as well. Salvador. During Carnival.
Yeah, very well. Thank you. I think it's late now, so we can close. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Congratulations.